Something strange is happening with the real estate market in the Triangle region of North Carolina, and it's actually something we haven't seen since 2010. But understanding how we got here is gonna take a little bit of backstory. So today I'm diving into where prices, competition, and buyer demand stand as of March 2026. And even if you aren't a numbers person, you'll definitely want to keep watching to see how the market around Raleigh, North Carolina has been performing lately, especially if you're a buyer, since I've got a bunch of good news for you. But before I get into that, my name is Matt Martin, and not only am I a Raleigh-based realtor, but I'm also a transplant to the region from New York and LA. I've helped tons of clients just like you do exactly what we did back in 2021 and relocate to the Triangle region of North Carolina. So if you're looking to do the same, I'd love to help you too. All right, quick methodology note. For these market updates, I always just look at single family homes across the 5 main counties of the Triangle region: Wake, Durham, Chatham, Orange, and Johnston. Now, I'd usually start these videos with where prices stand, since that's always what people are the most curious about. But I'm actually gonna save that until the very end, because everything I'm gonna dive into first will explain exactly what's happening to prices and why we haven't seen anything like this in over 15 years. Instead, I'm gonna start with the supply side of things. In other words, how many homes do we have for sale, since that's one of the biggest areas of movement over the last year. Let's start with just the numbers. Q1 2026 saw just over 7,000 new listings hit the market, and we ended the quarter with just shy of 7,600 active listings. This continues a trend that started back in March of 2024 of year-over-year inventory growth, which means sellers are now pretty consistently back in the market. As I'm sure you remember, we went through quite a few years there during and after COVID, where sellers were stubbornly holding on to their 2 and 3% interest rates and not listing, which was creating a huge inventory shortage that drove up prices and competition. But with more sellers now coming back into the market, we're seeing steady increases in inventory, and that's a great thing for buyers. But we're still not back to pre-COVID days where the first quarter of the year would regularly see 8,000 plus new homes hit the market, and active inventory actually averaged around 13,000 homes. Think about that. Before COVID, buyers had about 50% more homes to choose from, and the population was a lot smaller back then. So yes, we're moving in the right direction for buyers to have more options, but we're nowhere near where things stood pre-2020. Now, we typically see new listings spike in the spring, and that's exactly what happened this year. We saw 41% more listings this quarter versus last, which is still a bit shy of how the first quarter would perform in the years leading up to COVID, but not by very much. So I'd say we're operating pretty much in line with pre-COVID seasonal averages, which is great news as the last few years have been anything but average, and it's made it really hard to predict market activity. So it's a win for buyers that sellers are listing again. And with over 7,600 active listings as of the end of Q1, it means that buyers have a lot of options out there. In fact, this is the highest inventory number we've seen in a Q1 since March of 2020. But sellers listing their homes isn't the full story. Why else is inventory surging? Well, let's jump into talking about demand, or in other words, are buyers buying? So one of the best ways of determining demand is by looking at total closed sales. In Q1 2026, we had just over 4,000 closings, which is up ever so slightly by 1.8% year over year. But remember what I just said in the last section. We had over 7,000 new listings hit the market in Q1, which was up 8% year over year. So new listings are far outpacing closings, which explains why inventory is piling up. But it's not all doom and gloom. This is actually the first time since 2021 that we've seen closed sales increase year over year in Q1. So buyers did start to show up a bit more this quarter than in Q1's past. But does that mean that buyers are back? Not so fast. Let's do a quick rewind into what happened in Q1 2026. Interest rates were at the lowest point we'd seen in years, and they actually teased us by dropping below 6% at the end of February, even if just for a brief moment. So that got buyers excited, and we saw more of them coming back into the market than we had in a while. But since then, rates have rebounded back into the mid-6s, and buyers have put the brakes on. I actually had a buyer recently say to me during a contract negotiation, look, I don't want to go this high, but I realize that if I wait, I'm gonna lose buying power if rates keep going up. So I'd rather pay a little more now than have to settle for a worse house in the future. Pretty smart cookie. Now, here's where I would normally also talk about the US Consumer Confidence Index, which measures things like consumer buying intentions, vacation plans, and expectations for inflation and interest rates. And I do think this is one of the most important indices to help understand what's happening in the housing market. But I hesitate to dive too deep into it right now because that index only measured up until March 24th. And a lot has changed in the last couple weeks that may have impacted consumer confidence. But here's what I will say. At least as of that reporting period, consumer confidence had ticked up ever so slightly, but it's still at historically low numbers. So buyers are just way more hesitant about their financial security right now, which means they're even more sensitive to changes in rates and prices, and that perfectly aligns with the slowdown in activity that we've been seeing. Okay, so inventory is way up and buyers aren't chomping at the bit to pull the trigger on buying. So you can probably guess what that means for how competitive the market has become for buyers. We measure competition with two metrics, days on market and sale versus list price. In other words, how long are properties sitting before going under contract and how much are they selling for versus their asking price. In Q1 of 2026, days on market jumped to 39 days, up from 32 days last quarter and 29 days at this time last year. Now, 39 days may not sound like a ton, but this is the highest number we've seen in an entire decade, since March of 2015. Now, I said at the top of the video that something strange is happening in the triangle that we haven't seen since 2010. So this isn't that big headline just yet. In fact, days on market in March of 2010 were 74. So we're still way under that. But this is still significant, and it will explain that other phenomenon that I'll talk about in just a minute. So buyers in this market have a bit more time to make a decision, and they have more options to choose from, which has made the process a lot more enjoyable for many. The other metric, sale versus list price, gives even more positive news for buyers, as Q1 showed an average discount of 1.6% off of list price. Now, this might not sound like much, but when you look back to the COVID years where homes were going for 3 to 5% over asking, any discount is good news for buyers. This is also more of a discount than we've seen in the first quarter of the year since March of 2015. Are you getting used to hearing that date? So a 1.6% average discount is pretty significant for the triangle market. Okay, so inventory is up, demand isn't keeping up, and we're seeing more discounts than we've seen in years. So what's that inevitably mean? Prices are coming down. And here's where I get to the big headline. Q1 2026 marks the first time since 2010 that Q1 prices have dropped year over year. The first time in 16 years that the first quarter's median sales price was lower than last year. But don't get too excited. Prices only came down 0.2% from a median of $481,100 in March of 2025 to $480,000 this year. But again, this is hugely significant as it's something that hasn't happened in over 15 years. This tells me something very important. Sellers' expectations are finally coming more in line with market realities. What do I mean by that? Well, getting to this lower median sales price could have only happened two ways. One, more buyer negotiability, which drove down prices, or 2, sellers starting to price their homes lower. And we looked at buyer negotiability in the last section, and yes, it was up slightly, but not enough to completely counteract and actually reverse the typical year-over-year price growth. So instead, it tells me that sellers are getting more realistic and starting their pricing better in line with the market expectations. Yes, they're still taking discounts from there, but they're also understanding that pricing too high from the get-go will just turn buyers away completely. So what do I expect for the rest of 2026? So much of what happens over the next 3 to 6 months is really going to depend on buyers' level of comfort with getting back into the market. And whether that tick up in closed sales we saw this past quarter is an indication that they're already starting to do so. But with the recent spike in interest rates and consumer confidence still sitting at its lowest level in years, it's going to take more than just a pretty house to get buyers back into the market. Do I expect prices to tick up slightly as we move into the spring and summer? Possibly, but I wouldn't expect anything like the 6% or more that we typically see. During this period of buyer uncertainty, sellers are going to have to start aligning themselves with that reality and doing 2 things to ensure their homes sell. Number 1, price them right from the beginning. And number 2, making sure their house is the prettiest on the block to remove any doubts in a buyer's mind about the investment they'll need to make on the house a day after moving in. For sellers who get this, homes will continue to sell. And hey, we may even see a bidding war here and there. But for sellers who don't, that 39 days on market will more than likely be a dream scenario than a median reality. So that's your market update for March 2026. What stood out to you the most? Let me know down below in the comments. And if you're ready to take advantage of more inventory and reduced competition and want to kick off your home hunt here in the Triangle region of North Carolina, I'd love to be your guide. You can reach me by phone, email, or text, and you can find all my contact information in the link below or by scanning this QR code right here with your phone. And if you liked this video, I have a whole catalog of others all about moving to, living in, and buying real estate in and around Raleigh, North Carolina. Here's another one here that you may like, so give it a click to keep on watching.